Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Thea Sharrock and I'm a researcher on the MIMI project at the University of Sheffield. MIMI is a European-wide programme of research focused on themes of empowerment and integration, and we will be researching with young people with migratory experience alongside young people in longer standing communities to understand the issues that affect their lives and their strategies, ideas and aspirations for inclusive change. We're here today within Refugee Week as part of the Migration Matters Festival and as the final seminar in the 2020 to 2021 series of the University of Sheffield's Migration Research Group. And speaking from the UK context, we know that young people and migrant communities are facing persistent challenges driven by the intersections of austerity, hostile immigration policies, and deep-rooted inequalities that have been made starkly visible by the pandemic. And within this, and in response to this, it feels significant to have this platform to give recognition to the important research.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
Research and practice collaborations, both globally and locally, that we're going to hear about today. So a huge thank you to all of the speakers for joining this event. And within the MIMI project, we're currently developing our own approach to researching with young people in South Yorkshire. And we're here today to listen, learn and celebrate examples of research and practice that seek to build and deepen understanding of co-navigation and partnership. And as many of you will know, the theme for Refugee Week is We Cannot Walk Alone. Today we'll reflect on this idea together and why it's important. The speakers will draw from their own experiences and share reflections of what they've learned, the challenges that they've encountered and the innovations that they've grown. And in doing so, they offer challenges to the often unequal power relations that exist within more traditional approaches to research and practice. And today we don't only have contributions from partnerships within migration experience communities, we'll also hear from speakers who work with young people around themes of inclusion and unity, recognising the wider commitments to social justice embedded in this work. At the same time, we will have the opportunity to learn from those who are working together to understand processes of integration and inclusion with migrant communities. So the structure of today's session will be that we will have 3 presentations and then a short question and answer session. And we will then listen to the final 3 presentations and have a further short discussion at the end. Please type your questions into the Q&A feature on Zoom and we'll collate those and ask those in the Q&A breaks. And the chat function is there for general thoughts and reflections. And there will be some information about the activities, projects, organisations that you're hearing about today coming up in the chat as well. So although we won't have too much time for discussion today, we hope that you'll value the opportunity to hear from such a diverse set of contributions, and all of the speakers, including myself, will be very happy to have follow-up conversations and be in touch after the event. And we'll be hosting the information that all of the contributors have shared on the Migration Research Group website after the event, and you can follow up that way as well. So let's get started, and we are very lucky to have Gabe Poor joining us from Australia and Caitlin from the Manchester Centre for Youth Studies to start us off today. And they're going to be talking about their collaboration around Healthy Futures, which was a partnership between academics, the refugee background community and a health service in Bendigo, Australia. So let me hand over to Caitlin and to Gabe Poor. I think Caitlin might be having just a short difficulty with her connection. So let's just give her a minute, and if not, then perhaps, oh, here we are, here we go. Brilliant. Caitlin, Gabriel, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. Sorry for the technical drama. So thanks so much for inviting us to present today. We're really excited to hear about the work that everyone's doing. So I'm Dr. Caitlin Nunn. I'm a research fellow at Manchester Centre for Youth Studies at Manchester Metropolitan.
And hi everyone, my name is Gabriel and I am a member of the Korean refugee community in Bendigo. I'm also a community event creator and traditional dancer and currently a pharmacist at Bendigo Health Hospital.
So what we thought we'd do today is just tell you a little bit about the Healthy Futures project that we collaborated on in Bendigo, Australia in 2019 and 2020, and reflect on some of the key aspects of our collaboration. So we'll start off with Gaepor just providing a little bit of context about Bendigo and the Karen community.
Yeah, thank you. And now the Karen people are religiously and linguistically diverse group. And the Korean people have long been persecuted in Myanmar, where we are the ethnic minority. And approximately about 100,000 Korean people are in the refugee camp, which is located in the Thai-Myanmar border. And we have been settling in Bendigo ever since 2007. So we've been calling Bendigo our home ever since 2007. That's through the Australian Humanitarian Visa Program. And I'm very pleased to say that we are the Bendigo's largest ethnic minority as well, and numbering across approximately 2,500 and more. And that is because the word on the street is that Bendigo is a really nice place to live in, especially for the Korean people.
So Healthy Futures was a community-based participatory research project conducted in the regional city of Bendigo. It was a collaboration between myself, researchers at La Trobe University in Australia, Bendigo Community Health Services, which also runs the resettlement scheme locally, and members of Bendigo's refugee background Karen community, including 3 community researchers, including Gaepor. So the project emerged out of a growing concern from health service providers that members of the Karen community weren't accessing services at expected levels, and a more general interest in the health and well-being of the community. So you can see the research questions here. What do Karen people in Bendigo perceive as good health and good health care? What are the factors that impact on people's access to good health and good health care? And what could healthcare services in Bendigo do to enhance people's access to good health and good health care?
So in terms of the approach, there were the Healthy Future for Karen People involves 52 members of Bendigo Karen community, 3 Karen community researchers involved in this. So that's including myself, Chuge and Nido. And we ran the workshops within our community members of life, different stages of life. So that include the elders, the carers, and also mother of young children and young men and young women as well. In each workshop, data then collectively generated using participatory tools, including body mapping, assess mapping, which then accompanied with group discussions as well. And the workshops were conducted in Po and Tagalog dialects or languages, and depending on the individual's need or the group needs, the languages will be varying. And for example, if that was the young woman and young male group, they would prefer a bilingual discussions where they will swap from a Korean language to English language within one sentence. With all the workshop, it's recorded and the recordings then being transcribed. And then with the help of the community researchers and the university researchers, then they would then come together and identify the key findings from the workshops and group discussions and activities.
Yeah. So through the process, workshop participants identified clear opportunities to improve health services to better meet the needs of refugee background clients. So this included creating a tip sheet for service providers that helped them make Karen people feel more welcome. And it also included minor adjustments to processes and practices. So for example, some of the older people felt very strongly that they should be able to have a family member stay with them, especially if they don't speak English. So this was something that Bendigo Health were able to now incorporate into their practice. But one of the strengths of this collaboration was that by working across university and Karen researchers, we were able to identify a more significant issue. And in discussing in detail the Karen concepts that were utilised in the workshops, what emerged was a clear understanding that Karen understandings of health and care don't actually map very neatly onto Western biomedical approaches, and that this tension led to a lack of cultural safety that in some cases contributed to low engagement or ineffective care. So I'll show you just briefly some of the outputs that came from this project. We'll also put links to them in the chat. But we had the co-produced resource that's gone out to all of the health service providers in Bendigo. We created YouTube videos in Karen languages to feed back to the community, both the research findings and also the responses of the health service providers. And we used YouTube as a way of accessing those people who don't have written literacy. We've also co-produced some academic publications. When we reflected on our collaboration, there were 3 key aspects we thought were worth highlighting in this session.
And one of the key aspects within this research is that the community members as researchers. So being part of the refugee community myself, I have felt as though I've effectively recruited participants from different religions and also different social groups as well. And I've also ensured them to attend those activities as well. And I would pick them up with the taxi drivers just so that they will feel more comfortable to attend those activities, as opposed to them feel uncomfortable, because what happens is if they don't speak the language, they maybe feel uncomfortable to attend the activities. And I've also ensured them to say the things that they wanted to say, as opposed to the things that they wanted us to hear. So basically allowing their voice to be heard as well. And being there with them, making them to feel as though they would say the things that they wanted to say, because having a Korean person there, they're less likely to just say yes to everything that we've asked. And being able to speak the language, I have not only been able to translate the direct meaning of what they're saying, but more so also to translate what it means when a Korean person says something or saying particular words. For example, "satacha." So a direct translations for that is heart problems. But in reality, what it means when a Korean person saying that is more so depressions and anxiety. Yeah.
So building on Gaypo's discussion, and particularly this idea of Tatacha, which was a really a key concept for us, a strength of the collaboration was placing different forms of knowledge in dialogue. So I think, you all would be aware that there's a risk, and particularly in health, of what Santos calls epistemicide, or the murder of knowledge, which I know sounds very gruesome, but what he means is that dominant Western epistemologies have resulted in a massive waste of social experience, and particularly the destruction of ways of knowing that don't fit within that dominant epistemological canon. And so what this collaboration enabled us to do was not only share Karen concepts of health and care with health services, but also to identify potential approaches to healthcare that foster dialogue and understanding across different cultures and experiences. And this is work that we're really hopeful that Bendigo Community Health Service, as a partner on the research, will take forward into their practice. And then the third and final point we wanted to make was about recognising and building community expertise. So that's recognising community knowledge, as we've been discussing, but also recognising it in material ways. So paying community researchers, providing research training, co-authoring publications. So I think that's really important. I think it really ensures a non-exploitative relationship that we could only really ask of Gaypor and Nido and Tugay. We could only ask things of them that we were paying for, and I think that really worked against some of the hierarchies that tend to emerge in these projects. The other thing was that having Karen researchers and then having focus groups or participatory workshops allowed for different levels of engagement based on the different interests and capacities of community members, so that we had, Gaypor being able to take a lead and really work with us on the research, but those who maybe had just arrived or who were facing more challenges still had an opportunity to have a voice in the project. And we were also able to support the health service to develop their practice in terms of working from research. So I guess the final thing is just to maybe throw back to Gaypor to reflect on her experience as a community researcher.
Well, yeah, these research assistants role have provided me with a insightful experience. This is actually my first time doing a research assistant role, and in a way, it allows me to share our Karen community story as well. And now that the papers are out, the videos are, and also the teaching is out there for the community and the public to access them. And also not only the public, but more so the healthcare services to access them as well. We're hoping that they will utilize those materials and also in a way allowing us to be more known to them. Yeah.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you both so much. What an impactful piece of research and practice together. Brilliant. So I'm just going to hand over now to another research collaboration and invite Tesfalem and Vanya to share their reflections on working on a peer research project together from their work with Migration Yorkshire. So welcome both.
Thank you. Thanks, Tia. Hi, everyone. So Tesfalem and I will just have a little conversation between us, reflecting on a project we worked together at. So Tesfalem, you and I worked together on a research project which looked at how people who had personal experience of having refugee status settle in Yorkshire and Humber. And you joined us to work on that project as peer researcher. And the idea behind peer research or community research is that people with personal experience of the research topic help in the research process. And you and I talked a lot about the whole process many times in the past. And well, now we have just a few minutes, so it would be good if we could capture some of our past thinking. So you joined the project because you have personal experience of the research topic, but you also have quite a bit of experience of conducting and designing research, as you have 2 master degrees and you're doing your PhD in sociology at the moment. So I was wondering if you can reflect a little bit about your involvement as peer researcher, how you find peer research, is it useful at all? And what are some benefits of it or potentially some challenges? Just if you could reflect broadly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Vanya. Yeah, I guess mine will be just a personal reflection rather than a research-based kind of views and reflections. So I would like to start with what I have personally learned being part of the team. The first point I would like to highlight is the fact that it was a group of people who come from really diverse backgrounds in terms of their experiences, qualifications, linguistic experiences, other parts of experiences. So it was a very good learning opportunity for me. I was part of the process, so designing research, but also learning from the different perspectives and the experiences that the team members brought into the collective project. So it was a very good learning process for me. I also reflected on it in terms of what it means to involve peer researchers as a method, designing research, conducting interviews, recruiting. So it was also a very interesting and important learning process for me to see and reflect on how peer researchers can be considered as a method, as part of a method in methodological conversations in conducting research. So it was a very, very beneficial project from my personal perspective and my learning outcomes. Of course, there are issues, maybe questions of epistemological questions, questions about the knowledge production, who uses the knowledge, the fact that there were people who speak different languages, and then we had to translate and transcribe the interviews into English. So the ultimate question is, yes, we have produced the knowledge using this as a method, but who also uses the knowledge? So what are some of the epistemological questions in terms of knowledge production, knowledge circulation, in the context of what the former speakers talked about, for example, did we address some epistemic justice and epistemic healing, for example? These were some of the questions I had, but again, in reflective terms, it was a very important and learning process for me. In practical terms, it also helped us, the team, in terms of identifying and recruiting research participants. We were able, as peer researchers, we were able to build the trust and confidence with potential researchers. So people were forthcoming. They know we were part of the same journey somehow, and it helped us in terms of our identifying and recruiting research participants. As a peer researcher working with the lead researcher as well, because the project involved peer researchers and the lead researcher. So Vanya, you were our lead researcher. So working with you and maybe having those kind of categories, I think, in our mind were also a very important, reiterative kind of reflective process for me. What does it involve to work with the lead researcher? Are there any power dynamics, for example? How does it impact the conversations and the dynamics of conducting the research? When you take the table where we conducted our research, for example, there were 3 characters involved in that. So I always reflected on my multiple selves, multiple positionalities, as a refugee, myself, as someone who also comes from the community, which was part of the research as well, as a student of migration studies. I always reflected on how these different selves and positionalities intersect with each other. But more importantly, I was also reflecting on how you thought of your involvement. Sometimes we were talking in different language that you don't understand. When we had to pause the conversation so that I can maybe try to give you a brief summary of what was being said. And then you always reflect, interesting, but how does it impact the flow of the conversations and the interviews? So these were some of the really interesting learning outcomes, and both in reflective terms, but also in practical terms of conducting the interviews. I wouldn't say challenge, but questions that I had, for example, being part of the process was, for example, what does it mean for someone to be given the label peer researcher in the context of the wider context of being a member of the organization? Does it indicate a subliminal or maybe a marginal position in the organization, in the project? I don't know, but sometimes interesting questions that I was, okay, what does it say about our position and the place in the organization? Does it mean there is an element of us being just ad hoc members of the team, the project? Is it just a kind of a freelance position? Does it say anything about the power dynamics that might issue? Because you are a peer researcher, you're not a researcher. So why the peer in the peer researcher? Why not a community researcher? Why not a researcher? There were some questions that I was pondering. We talked about them, and another point I want to highlight is also again related to the level of peer researcher. And it was a diverse team, a group of people who came really diverse work experiences and qualifications, both in the UK and in their respective countries. And you asked whether the peer researcher positions were really commensurate of their qualifications and their experiences? Or was it a case of just them being the native data hunters, data gatherers, and interpreters? What does it say about the asymmetrical power dynamics, temporariness of their positions and the involvement, and otherness in terms of how they feel about being part of the team that was doing the research? So these were some of the questions I had, rather than maybe challenge that I can identify. And with that, maybe I would like to ask you a few questions, but I'll just read that. So there are some interrelated questions, I think. As you know, we joined the project at relatively early stage. We were part of the conversations in designing the research methodology, drafting and discussing about interview questions and the line of asking the questions, the data, the analysis. So from your experience of leading, and also now you led other similar peer research projects. So from your experience, would you reflect on the process of peer research projects? At what stage of the research process do peer researchers get involved, and where does the involvement stop? And what constitutes the peer in the peer research? What does it indicate? What does the peer indicate in the peer research? Maybe you might want to reflect on our example, for example. What made us peers? Was it just the fact that we were people who had migratory experiences? What other elements, distinctive elements or characteristic traits can we identify that would make us peers? I would also be good to reflect on your maybe reflect on your positions when we were trying to translate some of the interviews into Tigrinya and different languages. So maybe how we felt when we interrupt the interviews and then translate some of what was being said.
Wow, thank you. Thanks. I doubt I'll have time to address all of your questions, because you and I, as you know, we talked hours about this in the past, but I'll try maybe to make a couple of points that will address some of it anyway. Thank you for your really interesting insights, as always. And so the first point I'm going to make is to do more with the peer researchers' involvement. As you said, I think every project is designed differently, and I don't think there is one answer or correct answer when it comes to doing research or the research process in terms of when peer researchers or community researchers begin or stop being involved. So for me, I guess that question has a lot to do with how we generate and represent knowledge in collaborative projects and how we do it ethically and responsibly. So I think one thing that could be useful for us to consider is, what is the end aim of the peer research project, or which form the outcomes are going to have. Are we going to represent the research findings as a report, an article, or a book? If so, then in many peer research projects, this is where the participation could potentially end at that point, because it's, writing a book or an article can be less accessible for a lot of people, also less interesting for a lot of people. So I'm thinking we need to think about different forms in which knowledge is generated through research, which could kind of travel, and I don't know, so different forms of arts or music or blogs or poetry. Recently, a lot of organizations are using toolkits, so where people that are either community researchers or peer researchers could get involved, fully till the end. So that's one point. So the question that you brought up, what constitutes the peer, is a really interesting one, and something I've been thinking a lot about. So I previously worked on a project with peer researchers, and what made them peers was that they were all young people coming of age in a city in a post-war and a post-socialist context. So I guess it was that particular experience and their particular positioning in the life course that made them peers. Some other projects I know of that define peers as being associated with certain community, geographical community. They all live in a certain geographical area, for example. The project that you were involved in was different in a sense that the common experience, which turned everyone into peers, as you rightly said, was that everyone moved to live in the UK from elsewhere, and at some point of their residence here, they also held refugee status. But as a group, as you again rightly said, everyone was really everything was so mixed, right? So first of all, in terms of where people were positioned in their life course, so we had people in their early 20s who were still contemplating whether we don't want to study, and then we had people in their 50s. We had somebody who was a sociologist but couldn't find work in the UK. Everyone came from a very different geopolitical context and very different personal and socioeconomic circumstances, and also routes to the actual refugee status eventually ultimately were very different. So finally, everyone lived in different parts either of Leeds or even Yorkshire and Humber. So in many ways, that diversity was wonderful, as you said, if we wanted to kind of everyone brought so much richness to the project, and this is how we hope to gain access to a very broad range of experiences when doing research. On the other hand, what constituted peer on that project had to do with certain rather unenviable legal migratory status, that of a refugee. And this was at times quite tricky, I would say, as we kind of grouped together a very diverse group of people just because of that migratory status. So for me, I guess the question is, again, how to do peer research, community research in a way that transforms how we generate and communicate knowledge, while at the same time avoiding reinforcing these certain ideas of certain groups, which I think is quite challenging. But I think we probably are running out of time.
I think that's a really important question to end on, and one we can take into the rest of the discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Thea.
Sharing your experiences and, as I said, raising some really important questions about the dynamics involved in peer research. So we've heard from 2 partnerships around research so far, and we're going to move on to hear from Malachi and Will, who are connected to Unity Gym and the University of Sheffield, about their partnership around filmmaking together as counter storytelling. So welcome, Will.
Hi, thanks, Thea. Thanks, everybody. It's really nice to be here, and it's fantastic to hear about other, really inspiring collaborative projects. So it's great to be in the room. My name is Dr. Will Mason. I'm a lecturer in applied social science at the University of Sheffield, but I'm also a coordinator at a local community-based charity called Unity Gym Project in Sheffield. And I'm joined by Malachi. I'll let Malachi introduce yourself, mate.
Hi, Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'm Malachi. I've recently just finished university at University of Leicester, and I'm an ambassador for Unity Gym and was actually working with Will in this film.
Yeah, great. So we'd like to say a little bit about our project and just share a few reflections on, I suppose, our approach to collaborating. But we've just recently produced a film, and I think that's probably one of the most effective ways to communicate sort of who we are and what we're about. So we're going to show about 5 minutes of the film to start with, and then we'll follow that with a few personal reflections, starting with Malachi and then with myself. So if it's okay to just play the film, we'll kick that off first.
This is part of the area, it's part of where we've grown up from. So kind of immersed there, you can't choose to be part of it or not. Initially, just everyone's part of it. If you're living from home, you're part of Unity Gym.
Core membership is young people from the local area, but the gym is also used by international students at the University of Sheffield who come from all over the world. It's used by adults from the local area. There's a real mix. This is kind of like a melting pot of different groups and communities who all come together in this space But within the space, you know, there's a foundation of respect and support, and that's what makes it a really positive environment where people can meet each other that might not otherwise meet.
Unity Gym is like, it's a chance for us to actually leave the area, communicate with different people that are similar to us, that are from like different communities. So instead of us actually like getting into problems and not understanding each other, it's like a chance for us to get to know each other.
People get wrong that Broom Hall's like, oh, it's like a place like gang members, this and that. That's not necessarily true. Like, you got people that, for example, at this gym, that would care for you, and you know, it's just a good place to be at. It's full of peace and harmony, and it's just with like positive vibes all around.
A few of the lads, they'll show you a couple of landmarks we have, the 7 wonders of Broom Hall.
When we link up, when we meet up, we don't really say a spot, come to someone's house. It's white bars. Everyone knows where it is. Just talk and chill, man. That's really it. I mean, it's 2 white bars.
That's all it is.
I mean, it's like,
they're not even white anymore.
Exactly. Look, they're literally not even white anymore.
There's one bench there, and there's another patch down there.
And what's the significance?
If our age group's like at benches, then like the old age will probably be at white bars, if not vice versa. Just another like chill spot where we'd all like meet up.
Now that you've taken it away, what are you going to replace it with? Do you get what I'm saying? I think it brought people together in every way, really. Even not just us, like just people passing by, we just sit on it, just relax for a bit. It's nothing to do with any type of antisocial behaviour. I mean, I guess the council just took it away.
So this space now, do people still use it?
No. Not really, you know, not as much.
They cut the grass, but that's about it. It's not cataclysmic, but it's just something that it hurt people because there was no reasoning behind it. When you say you're going down to the gym, they know where you're going. You're not going to Pure, you're going to Unity Gym. You're going to see Mini Bob, you're going to see the boys, you're going to have a good time.
So he's grown up here, so he's friends with all the brothers, cousins, uncles, you get it? And he decided to open up a gym, gave us a space to work out. What's better for a guy to go to the gym, you know what I mean? It's part of your healthy lifestyle. You work with some organisations, give it a year, 2 years, they disappear, you know what I mean? Saeed can't disappear, we know where he lives, you get it? I know your door number, Saeed. You can't just disappear from us. Saeed's in the community, you get it?
As the founder of Unity Gym Project, I got involved in 2009, particularly after just prior to a young man losing his life. So we had a drive-by shooting in July 2009, where a young lad was shot at and ultimately died. And prior to that, we had a number of cuts and youth services being sort of dismantled. So we wanted as a community to do something about it. But it takes people to step up and actually, follow things through.
Unity Gym and myself was on the news, and we were called up to BBC Look North. It's because we worked with the University of Sheffield, and we kind of made some, we call it policies, proposals we put forward on how to better the community in a sense, and the BBC caught up on it and they've asked us to come through. We came through, so that's how we're on the news.
Unity Gym's like next to where everyone lives. It's run by Saeed, who literally everyone and their mum, literally everyone knows Saeed.
So the core is people, and Saeed, really. This is Saeed's project. Saeed set this up, and if it wasn't for Saeed's commitments over the last 10 years, the gym wouldn't be here. Nobody's paid to work in this gym. So it's entirely ran off the steam of volunteers.
For us as a charity, we were very, blessed and privileged really to have been one of the chosen charities for the Lord Mayor, Majid, and that helped to give us a bit of profile, but also for people to notice actually the work that we're doing.
Well, sadly, the reason Unity Gym exists is because our government shits. It's been a lack of youth provisions, not just in Sheffield, but so many other places. And as a result, you've had so many young people getting involved with crime, antisocial behaviour, knife crime, and actually some people are actually dying as a result. And I think what Unity Gym does, it actually provides a safe space run by members of the community who actually have got good rapport with a lot of young people. And I guess gives them that space where they can freely talk about certain issues.
I can watch it another million times. One of the best films to come out of Broom Hall. But yeah, so just start off by saying, if you think about the film academically, what we wanted to kind of achieve was a counter-narrative we've had lots of conversations in our community, you know, like how we're presented in the media or from an outside personal view, outside view narrative. There's a lot of racial narratives. For example, there's a large Somali population in the community, but there's also drug dealing. So it's quite easy to see, okay, there's Somali refugees and there's drug dealing. That's it. That's the two of you guys. But what we try to do is show, hey, we have these spaces. If there's more to the film, which I encourage you guys to watch, which shows businesses that have been opened, other spaces. So yeah, if you have a chance, watch the rest. But so what we've tried to do is stay away from conventional research that kind of reproduces these narratives and such as issues of crime and criminality, race. Even though some organizations may have good intentions, they often visit areas of social exclusion and reproduce those myths. And because of this, people usually feel reluctant to work with organizations and some universities that want to come into our community. But the reason the relationship with the University of Sheffield and Unity Gym is so strong is because there's no such thing as University of Sheffield coming in to Bromholt, the community. They were there from the beginning. As you can see, Will, he's organic. We've had a very organic relationship. Yeah, so it's done more as a response to community needs rather than an objective research. And that's transparent. And you think, oh, only academics can notice these things, but people in the actual community know when someone's being like genuine or there's an objective or a research agenda behind it. So even from my mother to my younger sibling, we've all benefited from the University of Sheffield and Unity Gym relationship. There's that level of understanding and that non-exploitative nature, which we've kind of understood from the get-go. Will?
Thanks, Malachi. Really articulate kind of overview there of the relationship from your perspective. And I think for me, there's a sort of few key principles that we've tried to adhere to right from the start. I should shout out Saeed as well. So this Saeed Bassab is really the kind of kingpin of Unity Gym project. It's a shame he can't be with us today, but none of this work happens without Saeed. And all of the work that we do collaboratively is in dialogue with Saeed. So I'm quite fortunate in the respect that I kind of span the two institutions, the gym and the university, and kind of am situated in a bit of a mediating role in that respect. I think it's important to point out that a lot of the work that we do isn't research. A lot of the work that we do is community-oriented work, which is just about responding to the needs of the community. But there are occasions where drawing on the resources from the university or other kind of methodological skills enables us to respond to the needs of the community in ways that are appropriate. And when we decide collectively that that's the case, that's when these kind of participatory projects happen. So there's a sort of spine of just volunteer engagement as a board member of the Unity Gym, as a user of the Unity Gym, which is where the basis of our relationships are. And relationships are right front and center of all of this. And then it's about listening to what's happening locally and seeing about where it might be appropriate to draw on the resources of the university. So I think what we try to do is invert the conventional research relationship in a way that's kind of really aligned with the core principles of participation. So it's not about dreaming up research projects in the university and then knocking on the door. It's about being in the community. It's about knowing what's what. It's about having strong relationships and then responding to needs in ways that are appropriate and being open enough to recognize that research is not always the appropriate response, but sometimes it's helpful. And when it's helpful, then we see about how the university can support and be involved. And it's a privilege for me to sit here with Malachi and to be in a position to talk about the gym. We really enjoyed making that film together. The filmmaker's name is Brett, and I'll send his link on the chat because he's a fantastic filmmaker. I've already posted the full YouTube link in the chat, so if people want to have a look at that, it's there. We've also co-authored a short article for Youth and Policy recently about the film with some more of the academic justification that Malachi introduced, so I'll post that in the chat as well. Really happy to answer questions if there are questions from the group. Thanks for listening.
Fantastic.
Malachi, is there any final word that you want to say before we finish?
I just really encourage everybody to watch the film, read the report, and yeah, take heed of what Will said. Sometimes research is not always the best way to get involved into a community, only when it's necessary.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And please keep your cameras on. I'll invite all of the speakers that have just spoken to turn on their cameras. We've got such little time for Q&A, which is such a shame. So I'm going to ask the speakers who are being given targeted questions in the chat to type their answers to people directly. Sorry, in the Q&A, so you can have a look at those. But just to pick up on a point that's been raised in a few questions, I would like to ask Gaypur, Tesfalem and Malachi each, if they are happy to share one reflection on a challenge that they faced in being positioned within the communities that this research and practice has taken place within, and brokering the relationships between the communities involved. So if you have one point you might want to share each on that issue around the challenges involved from your position, that would be great. Would anyone like to?
Yeah, I'll go first. So sometimes it's quite hard to actually engage with the community and from a research perspective as well when speaking with the University of Sheffield side, because like I said, there's usually that lack of trust and there's usually that hesitation and reluctancy to get that help. So it's kind of convincing them, like, if regardless of University of Sheffield, it's speaking to them, get involved and stuff. Some people, like I said, that reluctancy, and yeah, I just say it's just convincing people into get involved. But with University of Sheffield Community Gym, it's not really a frequent challenge, to be honest. Usually it's other organisations and stuff like that. If I've answered your question correctly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Malachi. Yeah, Tesfalem.
Yeah, mine was also about the ethical aspects of approaching someone, asking them if they are happy to sit for the interviews, for example. People will say, yes, they know you, then they have the confidence, which is great, as if you see that in terms of recruitment and identifying potential research participants. But as someone who also comes from the community, sometimes you also ask yourself, yes, I know someone is forthcoming, but what are some of the ethical considerations that I have to be careful in, and how do I distance myself from the personal knowledge, for example, or kind of the position and location I have within the community, and then make it actually it's them who are making the informed decisions. They have the power to say no, and then they are happy to say no. So sometimes you want them to encourage to say no, because you want them also to know that they are happy and giving consent, making informed decisions.
That's a brilliant point, and important being able to say no. Absolutely. Thank you. And Gaypur, anything to add?
Yeah, so with the Karen community, we definitely have like sensitive topics or topics that we don't really want to share, but within that activities, I have to make sure that they actually say everything, and whatever they say stays there. And if there's any things that they don't want us to publish, then they can let us know. So yeah, I have to make them feel comfortable that way.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Really deeply felt ethical considerations from all of you. So thank you for sharing those. Please keep an eye on the questions that are coming in for you all in the Q&A box, and get back to people on those. But to keep moving forward with the presentations, I'll invite our colleagues from Stand to Be Counted Theatre to share their contribution around working collaboratively. Thank you.
Fab. Thanks so much, Thea, and thanks to all the people that we've heard from already before now. There's some really great stuff, and I'm following everyone on Twitter and making sure we keep up to speed. So I want to do a very short intro to the company, and then we're going to go over to Hannah and then Mohammed and Khaled, because that's where the real insight into all of this is. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. We can see that. So just wanted to start by saying Stand to Be Counted is a theatre company. We're a theatre company of Sanctuary. which means that we make work with and about those seeking sanctuary in the UK and beyond. So SBC is very much based on co-creation, all the principles that we've been talking through already about the way that we make work, and the process is very much kind of embedded from the starting point with community groups. We work across the UK, but we are based between Bradford, Sheffield, Coventry at the moment, but predominantly we work across Yorkshire. So I will, just kind of start by showing you a couple of images from previous works, so you can get a sense of the style of the things that we like to create. So this is Indrajit, who's the founder of City of Sanctuary. We have got really close associations with that organisation, which I'm sure many people know about. It's a grassroots movement to support and welcome people who might be new to a place, a town or a city. So we make theatre and we make films and we make digital projects. So we use theatre as a term for the kind of the action in what we do rather than necessarily the output. So what we mean specifically by that is we think that theatre has the power to engage people, to provoke them, to stir them, to inspire them and to educate them. And theatre for us is about the process of making a project. It's not always the outcome. It might well become a piece of theatre by the end of it, but depending on who's involved and who's leading that particular project, it might become just a song, it might become a poem, it might become lots and lots of different creative things. So theatre is the tool and not necessarily the outcome. So that's Hannah there, working on a project that we did in Leicester a couple of years ago, and that is one of our stage shows that we did in 2018 that's toured the country before now. So we make films. So this particular project that you see there that we released last year was a documentary about a brilliant young man who we know who went through a really challenging time with the Home Office. So we made firstly a theatre performance about that particular scenario, led by Tafadwa all the way through. And then we made a kind of follow-up film because we really wanted to make it clear to our audiences that when the theatre piece finished that night, the journey continues, the battle continues, and we wanted to kind of do a follow-up project. So all the people that we engage with, we're always looking for ways to engage them continuously throughout what we do, which means that we can have that consistent relationship, which is so important in this kind of particular work. The project that we're working on at the moment, hence why you can see the beautiful city of Coventry in my backdrop, is an outdoor celebratory performance that we're doing this Sunday on World Refugee Day. So we're going to make a park completely transformed, which is part of the City of Culture year here in Coventry. So lots of different projects that we deliver across the year. And what we're going to talk about more specifically today is these two projects. So I'll just give a bit of an indication about Hidden Winter, but we're going to focus on Have Your Passport Ready because this was made by led by two brilliant people who are on the call today, who are based in Sheffield. So we'll focus on that. But Hidden Winter as a project is an audio story that we made just recently during lockdown, and it was going to be a theatre piece, but again, the way that things developed with the participants, but also the restrictions around COVID, which was quite significant, meant that actually it became a really interesting and focused interactive audio storytelling project for little ones. So there's the image of Have Your Passport Ready, which is, as it says on the screen there, a gaming adventure through the hostile environment. And I wanted to just kind of put those rave reviews on there, not because we want to kind of say how brilliant we are as a company, but I want everyone to know how brilliant the two people you're about to meet are, and they are particularly modest. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that this project that they were absolutely leading has got those kind of reviews from people, and it has been seen. This needs to be updated, but it was seen in its first month, Have Your Passport Ready, by nearly 3,000 people across 57 countries. So the impact of the work that was created within that interactive film was significant, not just here in Yorkshire, but across the world. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah and then Mohammed and Khaled. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Hannah, over to you.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us as part of this event today. It's really great to be here. So just for a bit more context about Have Your Passport Ready, we have been a theatre company of Sanctuary for about 5 years now, and there was a kind of growing tension in the industry, that there was a lot of work that was really well-intentioned, that was kind of made about the stories of people seeking sanctuary. And so the real kind of ethos of being a theatre company of Sanctuary is the with, not for, that John mentioned. So I wanted to share how we met, how particularly the moment at which SBC Theatre met Khaled and Mohammed outside the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield. So there are a few theatre companies of Sanctuary now across the UK, and Khaled had worked with Curious Monkey, who were a theatre company of Sanctuary also around that time. So there's a real sense of sharing resources between these theatre companies that are quite small. So we have been working together. We call ourselves the Welcome Consortium, and we are a network of theatre companies who share experience, practice, resources, to try and join the dots a little bit and try and make sure that we as a consortium are functioning in the best possible way and to make the most interesting and the most valuable theatre practice. So we met based on a really quick phone call because we were running a project in Sheffield where we were running workshops. So a lot of our work is actually not public facing at all. So we run programs of workshop across the country, but predominantly in Bradford and in Sheffield. And so I just remember the moment when I called Khaled and said, we've got this project happening. We hear you're in Sheffield. We've got friends across the way in Newcastle. We know that you know them. Maybe you'd like to come and join us. And that was the moment that sparked Have Your Passport Ready. So we had been making theatre work for some time, and then around March time, 2 years ago, we had been in close conversation with Khaled and his brother Mohammed, who's also here, to talk about what another project might look like. So this really was a kind of a really big experiment for all of us. So obviously we'd been making theatre for around about 7 years at this point, and it was a couple of conversations during a coffee break in a series of theatre workshops that sparked what became Have Your Passport Ready. So maybe Khaled, if I could hand over to you, would you like to tell us a little bit about why you wanted to make this particular project with us? So why choose this this platform? Khaled, over to you.
Hello everyone. I'm Khaled. I would like to share my experience, how I came to England, and different culture, different language, different number. It's hard for everyone who are moved from country to other country. It's specific for me because I was living Zatari refugees camp in Jordan, and I wasn't speak any English when I came here. I tried my best to improve my language now. So yeah, that's why I'm trying to have your passport ready.
That's brilliant, thank you. So so we made a video game for the first time, and we as a theatre company had never done that. So Khaled, can I ask you, why do you think a video game is the right way to communicate this topic with people?
It's my opinion. It's every time when we want to see something that's just it's a YouTube video, but it's a little bit different to everyone to think it's a game and to see it.
Yeah, great, because you have to actually participate and you have to physically get involved. And for anybody listening who's interested, Have Your Passport Ready is still accessible, so you can go and check it out afterwards if you're interested. Mohammed, how do you feel the project went? So perhaps you could tell us a bit about some of the things that you learned as part of making this video game.
Hi everyone, my name is Mohammed. Like at the first, like when we meet, we say like we want to make a video game. I was excited, and also I'm still excited for it. But like I didn't imagine how's the work is going to be. But like I didn't imagine how's like it's going to be a 3,000 or 4,000 gonna see it. But I was thinking like only 300 or 400 gonna see it. But I didn't imagine how much like the work be good.
Thank you. And Mohammed, who do you think needs to play the game? Who are the people who should play Have Your Passport Ready? Who is it for?
Who's the people? The people who didn't have that experience go around the cities, go around the countries, who who don't speak like another language, who don't feel how's the people being moving from different country to other countries. How's the feeling? How's the feeling you seeing a new culture, a new traditional, new people, new friends, new language?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, so the game attempts to put the player in the position of somebody experiencing a new city in a secondary language, essentially.
Can I add something to Mohammed? Also, the people who are provide something like a school relationship to study at university, because when I was in that refugee camp in Jordan, it wasn't any school relationship for the Syrian people there. We're trying so hard to study at the university, but we can't because we don't have that a big amount to study in Jordan. That's why I would like to share. I would like to be a voice of the refugees. It's not the world refugees, but I mean, for the first step, the Syrian refugees in Jordan.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Khaled. Is there anything either of you want to add about the process? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it was like making the video game. So tell us a bit about behind the scenes. Mohammed,
yeah, it was great, and we when we was making the video game, it was the pandemic of Corona, and everything is locked down, and it's very hard to do the work. It was so excited to do it, and I really have enjoyed the video game. To be one of the video game, that's so amazing.
Thank you, Khaled.
Thanks. Sorry. Thanks for everyone who had watched it, and even to give a small feedback for us to improve our skills.
Thank you, that's great. Yeah, so we'd be keen to hear questions about this particular project. It was our first venture into making work in a different capacity. So we've always tried to make our work as participatory as possible. We make work which implicates the audience in a variety of ways. But this project, this collaboration was a real experiment for us. So we'd love to hear feedback now or later. Thank you very much. John, do you want to add anything before we wrap up?
No, I think you've done a really gorgeous summary, but I just wanted to say, yeah, thanks again to Khaled and Mohammed, who it was just so brilliant to be involved in making a process that they decided upon. And yeah, there's lots more to this project that will still happen from here forward. It's certainly not the end. It's only in the beginning, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Really lovely to meet you, Khaled and Mohammed.
Thanks a lot.
You, John and Hannah. It's really important work. I really encourage everyone to follow the link and to go and play this game. It's incredibly powerful. So we'll move over now to Kelly Devaney at the University of York, who has been doing research on the experiences of working together with the young people in the asylum system. So Kelly, I'd love to hear about your research, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to attempt to share my screen. Can everyone see everything?
Yes, perfect.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. So yeah, I want to talk about this idea of co-navigation and whether this is a valuable idea for understanding how social workers or social care professionals work with specifically unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people and children. So those are children and young people who arrive in the UK without a parent or guardian. And I think this is a kind of important idea because there's been a lot of debate, a lot of tension about what the role of social work might be. And normally social workers are coming into contact with unaccompanied children and young people when they first arrive, and they go into the care system and are looked after, and then later leaving care and moving into independence. And there's been a lot of critique, I think, of the work that's done in this area. Some suggestion that social workers, because they work on behalf of the state, are agents of the state, complicit with hostile immigration policies, or maybe even powerless against some of those policies, which are in direct kind of contravention to their values of working in a child-centered way and working for the best interests of the children and young people they work with. And there's also been accusations that researchers and social workers ignore the informal social networks that young people have, their friendships, their family, and have a kind of child rescuing approach that ignores people's agency and tries to control the children and young people in their care. And Ravi Kohli has kind of talked about this a little bit and tried to work out what social workers actually do with children and young people. And he had these different domains that are up there on the screen: cohesion, connection, coherence. And they're quite fancy words for what essentially is kind of working either on a practical level in the domain of cohesion through to a much closer, more therapeutic relationship. And so what I wanted to look at in my interviews with unaccompanied young people and professionals was how we can cut through all these tensions and ideas to understand what actually might be valuable about the work that professionals are doing. And the findings led me to think about this idea of co-navigation and how that might be a useful way of thinking about the possibilities of practice for social workers. And I think sometimes we think of the journey for refugee and asylum seeking young people as ending when they arrive, but there's actually literal and metaphorical journeys still to go through to independence, into adulthood, and to achieving the future goals that young people have. And guiding young people and accompanying them on that journey can be a really important part of that of practice. And this isn't my term, co-navigation. It was first used by Vig, not in this particular context, but to talk about how young people navigated environments where there was lots of social breakdown and oppressive social voices, social forces, but it has been used in this context by others, and I'm going to use it here to talk about practice specifically. And so I want to break it down a bit. It's just a term, it's just some words, but what does it really mean? And it is about taking a journey, and like all journeys, that's going to involve navigating logistical and practical challenges and having experiences and building relationships along the way. And I want to say that the young people in my research really valued practical forms of helping, which assisted them to navigate these really complex social environments and bureaucracies around accessing education, university, college, health services, housing. And this quote from Sahel about letterboxes, which totally resonated with me as well, was just the volume of correspondence and bureaucracy that was coming through his door every day and was completely overwhelming. And he found social work services particularly helpful with that. He was kind of reflecting on whether he ought to glue his letterbox shut because it was completely overwhelming. And whilst friends are there for lots of things, emotional support, leisure, fun, he found social services the most helpful place for just working through and helping him guide through a lot of that bureaucracy. But that's, practical assistance is rarely purely practical, and there's an emotional engagement that happens when you're helping people, even in the most pragmatic ways. And therapeutic bonds developed through kind of a competent and capable practitioner helping young people with those practical things. So this other quote here, which is saying that, Magda had quite a practical professional relationship with his social worker, but that was really important. And he felt close to that worker through being able to trust in that assistance with those pragmatic kind of working through everyday life in a strange and alien new environment. And I want to talk briefly about this literal journey that one of my participants took with her social worker. Zahara found some of her family that she'd been separated from on her journey to the UK, and she found them in a different European country. And that's instigated this huge practical challenge for the social worker of trying to help Zahara visit her family and get through the bureaucracy to make this literal journey to visit her family. But also, of course, wrapped up in that was an extremely emotional journey, and the social worker, you'll see from the quotes I've put up, said that she wasn't quite sure who cried most during this whole process. And so you see here the confluence of practical, logistical forms of helping that social workers should be well trained to do, leading into more emotional, therapeutic, close bonds over time. And I also want to address this issue of power, because a lot has been written about agency and how we promote young people's agency. But I think sometimes that's agency has been seen as something oppositional to the control of professionals and social workers. But actually, the young people in my study saw agency as something much more relational, and they were really aware that of the power, though limited, still existed within social workers to advocate for them, to use their knowledge and expertise to bolster young people's agency and help them achieve their goals. So co-navigation is therefore thinking about these relationships and how how young people can utilize professional relationships to increase their agency and ability to make choices. And a very short quote there from Sophia about her social worker saying that she's powerful for me, she's very strong and she's very powerful. So this is how a lot of the young people I spoke to felt about exercising their agency through using their relationships with professionals. Of course, the most kind of difficult terrain to navigate is the immigration environment, the hostile environment of immigration policy. And this is perhaps where this co-navigational role becomes the most important, because whilst I'm a huge advocate of recognising the informal social networks that young people have, in my research, the best chance that some of those young people had at the sharp end of immigration controls of being able to understand what was happening and what best to do next was to use the networks they had of social workers and social care professionals. However, it's really important to consider the limits of that power, and particularly when young people age out of the social care system and they've officially left care and are not entitled to access any of those services or those professionals anymore. However, having said that, there was lots of evidence in my research that even when young people aren't entitled because of their age, social workers were unofficially providing a lot of support to young people who return to them, sometimes after many years of not using social services. When things went bad with their home office application, that was one of their first ports of call. So it's a crucial part of the social work role. So whilst we can see social workers and social care professionals as being part of a state apparatus which is oppressive, within that there's also a lot of opportunity for social workers to use their power and knowledge in more positive ways. However, it's not all rosy, and there are a lot of complexities around the power that professionals have. And I'm just going to read this quote, and I might not have a chance to speak about it fully, but I think it's worth reflecting on. And this was from a social care professional who said, one young person had been in trouble with the police, and I've warned him he's at risk of just being picked up and taken into detention. There's nothing I can do. When he was doing well, I'd tell him to keep going. I'd fight tooth and nail for him. But when I think of what I've been through with him, the emotions, when I see him doing the right things, not doing the right things, I just go cold. So I think it's important to notice here that it's not as simple. This co-navigational journey is negotiated, it's fluid, and it changes and flips over time. And social workers were quite flipped themselves from discussing their advocacy role and the power that they would have to fight for young people, to then kind of portraying themselves as powerless in the face of the immigration system. And I think partly that was a strategy to try and get young people to do the right things and stay out of trouble, but also a real feeling of not being certain about what level of power they had within the system, and an occasional feeling of powerless against the hostile environment. So this isn't, I don't share this to talk about bad practice and to pick on a particular person's practice, but to say that this is a very the power and agency is fluid and negotiated, and that having emotionally close bonds with professionals was good, but also had this flip side of everything becoming quite entangled. So it wasn't always the perfect solution to have the most close relationship. Is it okay for me just to read my conclusions, Thea? So just quickly, I wanted to say that social care professionals can act as co-navigators, guiding young people through the hostile environment of immigration controls as well as other complex bureaucracies. And I'll just jump to the last point, which is that here I don't want to reify the role of professionals and say they're the only possible co-navigators for young people, or that there are equal power relations at all, but just to emphasize the possibilities for practice if social workers and young people can traverse this really hostile terrain together. Thank you. I'm going to try stop share.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly. That was really, really interesting and important work. And I'll be really interested to hear what our next speakers think about that, moving from co-navigation and social work practice to setting up an anti-racist organisation with young migrants and refugees. So Javier and Jasper with the Anne Matthews Trust, you could close our session today with your input. Thank you.
Hello. I hope you can hear me and see me. My camera is on. I'm Javier Sanchez Rodriguez. I am part of the operational team here at the Anne Matthews Trust at the Braigoch Centre in Wales, Cymru. And my background is of migration. I'm a person of migrant and refugee background. And I am one of the persons that supports the development of this center, which main method of work is popular education and participatory action research.
Thanks, Xavier. My name's Jasper Singh, Jazz, you can call me Jazz. I work at Coventry University where I'm a researcher, but I'm also a trustee at Anne Matthews Trust. One of those things, it's a funny role being a trustee. It's one of those legal requirements, but I work closely with the Anne Matthews Trust and support the work that Javier and many others are doing. Important to point out that I was born in the UK, so I don't have that nuanced and lived experience of seeking asylum or having migration experiences from one country to another. So I think that's really important. Just going forward in terms of the presentation, we don't actually have research in the traditional sense where we're going to present about research and whatnot, but as Javier said, we are an organization based on popular education and participatory action research. So reflection and action is the cycle we adopt. So our bodies are sites of research, and people who are associated with AMT are bodies of research as well. So the whole idea of research emanating from our bodies is a key issue. So just to start off with some reflections, and probably important to point out, me and Javier have been working together for how many years, Javier? Maybe, oh God, it's too long, isn't it?
Yeah, over 12 years, I think.
Yeah. So we've been thinking about this stuff a lot. And one of the things that unite us at AMT is to think about the question of race. So one of the things that we've been thinking about is that the change and shifting patterns of race in the UK. So for example, and this is a little bit historic, but not overly academic, is race as a biological category has been largely discredited, especially, let me just turn off my phone. Sorry. The joys of working at home. Race as a biological category is largely discredited, especially since UNESCO's statement following World War II. So, this idea of race as biology is gone. And on the whole in the UK, the question of diversity has become the successor of multiculturalism in Britain. So multicultural Britain is largely dead and we kind of celebrate diversity. So being different is okay, and Britain claims to be beyond race, so race doesn't matter. It declares itself as post-racial and inclusive, race doesn't matter. At the highest level, racism isn't tolerated. We have some of the best legislation in Europe, especially post Stephen Lawrence. and race is no longer an issue that discriminates in policy like it used to be. So the segregating housing in Smethwick, for example, in the 60s, etc., those aren't policies now, those race-based issues aren't policies. So if racism does happen, rather than through policies, it's in the head of a few bad apples who need re-education. What we think is that the race-based inequalities in recent reports are being denied and explained through ideas of culture and skills, precisely because the UK declares itself as post-racial. So in our reflections, we've noted that conversations about immigration, migrants, immigration policies, hostile environment, people who seek asylum are often unhooked from discussions about race and anti-racism. So the post-racial erases the history of how race has shaped Britain and denies the current power of race within the British state, in society and institutions. So for us, race is a clear technology of power, and our participatory action and research, our reflections, the institutional building that we do in our AMT face race, patriarchy, and heteronormativity, as we believe, that they continue to mark our minds, our own minds, my mind, and every aspect of British society. So in other words, anti-racism is a key reflection in our institutional building, and Javier will talk a bit more, because he does more of the work, to be honest, around building this anti-racist organisation in Wales.
Right. So yes, just to build up on what Jas was saying, anti-racist and anti-sexism, I think we have to speak about both things at the same time. It's at the core of what we do here at the Matthew Strauss at the Brygock Centre. The centre has been created by people of refugee and migrant backgrounds with the support of others that lend their privileges and their time to make it possible. But the people who manages and carries out the work are all people of refugee and migrant backgrounds. What we specialize here is to provide a sanctuary space for people who have arrived in the UK, either seeking asylum or with already a status, or people who have migrated for whatever reason. We don't distinguish between people with a status or non-status or any type of experience of migration. We say we are an organization of people from refugee and migrant backgrounds. So the sanctuary programs are spaces in where we use the centre, which is a 450-year-old bunkhouse or inn in Wales, in the Snowdonian National Park. We use this space to invite community organizations or individuals to come and have a break from the oppressions of cities, or from the oppression of their own life circumstances, such as seeking asylum or unemployment or racism or sexism. So we work with organized groups, such as Solidarity Hall in the northeast of England, in Hull. We work with people, individuals who might just want to come. And when they come here, they can choose either to have an experience which is just like anyone else will have when they come to Wales, of hiking, of finding out what the surroundings have to offer, swim in a lake or go to the sea. But also people have the option of choosing to do a structured program or a mixture of those two things, in which what we do is take people through the training of learning what participatory action research and popular education is, and how that can be applied to the different organizations that the people participate on. At the moment, just to highlight what I'm talking about, we are doing a program that is called the Getaway Program. And in this one, we have recruited people from 4 different organizations across the UK, in which we have taken 2 young adults, which is we specialize on adult education for young adults. We have taken 2 young people from each organization, and we have trained them in participation methodologies and popular education around the issue of how to organize how to organize a residential experience. So in a way, we are passing on the skills of what we do here by replicating through a project how to organize residentials and taking into account how to organize a program, how to train peers. So it is peer-to-peer learning and action learning. So in a way, we have online sections in which people are, some of the methodologies are passed on and planning is done. And then we culminated, we're in the middle of the project, where the young people, obviously using very safe methods and taking into account all the COVID safeguardings, were able to come here into the center and meet face-to-face and reflect on what they have learned for the 5 previous sessions that they did. Now they are in the phase where they have gone back and we have provided funding for them, for each organization, so that they can organize a residential for their peers in which they will try out all the different aspects of the work around anti-racism, around anti-sexism, but also how to organize and structure program for other peers, including, you know, all that have to do with having fun and being and enjoying nature and all of that. So the center is this. We also have collaborative projects across the UK, but also internationally. So we got collaborative projects in Jamaica and in Colombia. And I just want to use this opportunity to highlight what is been happening in Colombia. In Colombia at the moment, we are having a mass repression of people, especially young people. And we are actively supporting people on the ground, organizing against this state for the past month and a half. Colombia have been the victim of dictatorship, in which the government has actively been killing young people in the streets for protesting. There is over 100 people being killed and more than 5,000 people legally detained. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to share this crowdfunding link in which we are trying to fundraise, also is in the chat. Also our website is in the chat. And I just want to say, as a person of migrant and refugee background, you know, the experience of being in the UK, of having to come with my family to seek refuge in the UK in 1995, is connected with the mass displacement of people, I'm a person of peasant descent, from their land by governments, oppressive governments, and to free land for multinational organizations. Now, how does this relate with this conference and what I'm talking about? It relates directly to the point that in Colombia at the moment, the police are the ones killing and displacing people. The police, the army, security forces, and far-right paramilitary militias. They are displacing people. They are creating problems, and there is an active genocide going on right now. And the relationship to the UK is the fact that it is now being documented and discovered by several news outlets that the British police have been training actively the Colombian police. Therefore, it is the British taxpayer who are financing regimes abroad. That's one thing. Creates migration and forced migration, and people end up seeking asylum in these countries because of direct involvement of the British government within politics and policies within those countries. So it is related in the fact that the British police haven't even come out to say that it is not true, that the documents have been found about their training the police in Colombia. They haven't denied it. And therefore, when I heard lots of people saying that why are there so many refugees coming into this country, I think we need to do the analysis of how is it that our governments are actually supporting regimes that are creating refugees or people of refugee and migrant backgrounds. I want to leave it there. Jazz, would you like to take it on?
Sure. So I think one of the challenges in setting up an organization that is led by people who've got experience of the lived experience of being a refugee is to allow a space where that organization can be diaspora led. So you can't really switch off what's happening in other countries because people of diaspora need to be able to express that. And I think that's one of the challenges in how to create an organization that is quite local, but also international as well, because those international issues just don't switch off. And for Javier, those live issues in Colombia, and there's live issues in other countries as well. And I think that's one of the challenges, is how do we bring that story into the story that we talk about in terms of migration and refugee experiences? Because I think is a key challenge that is an important part of people's identity.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much, and thank you for finishing today with that important challenge. I think it's something that everyone here can take forward in their own work and in their own practice, and thinking about the connections globally. Huge thank you for your work and for your time, and to everyone who has been able to join today. We're not going to be able to have space for question and answers now, because we wanted to give plenty of room to the presenters and without cutting people off when they've had such important contributions to make. But really brilliant to learn about such important work. And I know we've only got a flavour today, but hopefully it's a starting point for continued collaborations between all of us and with those in the audience today. And as mentioned earlier and in the chat, we will be communicating the links and the knowledge that's been produced today on the Migration Research Group website. You can keep an eye out on Twitter for an announcement at Sheffield MRG. And we will also be hosting more events in the future as a part of the mini projects, taking these important conversations forward and building solidarity, as Javier and Jasper have outlined, to look at what transformative change really means from the global to the local levels. So a huge thank you from me, and please keep an eye out for next year's seminar series, and a final thank you to all of the presenters, especially also for answering the questions that people posed directly through the type chat. I think that worked really well, so thank you for all of your efforts there. Brilliant. Wishing you all the best, and have a fantastic Refugee Week, and enjoy the rest of Migration Matters Festival.
Thank you.